Hi everyone, I'm Alice. I'm a trainee solicitor at Norton Rose Fulbright. And just to quickly introduce myself, I'm originally from Milan and I came to the UK in 2017 to start university, and I graduated from the University of Oxford in 2020 in law, and then I sort of started working at Norton Rose Fulbright in 2021. So as you may know, I'm here today to kind of give you an overview to what it's like to work in maritime law and what it involves, and also to explain what to do if you're interested to sort of pursue a career in this field. So just gonna try and go to the next slide.
Just try to give you the remote control, Alice. So I think you need to take it over and then you should be okay. There you go, that's fine. You've got it.
Oh, oops.
There you go.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So just quickly, I wanted to start off with a list of, okay, here we go. Okay, thanks. To start to list a few of the careers that you can do that have to do with maritime law. So first of all is being an Admiralty practitioner. And these are kind of the lawyers that have to do with things like collisions, groundings, fires, salvage. So all the big sort of damages that can occur at sea. And what is really interesting about this type of lawyer is that many of these lawyers were at sea before they started their career as lawyers. So for example, they could have been deck or engine officers or naval officers, and their practical experience is really useful for what they do because they advise on the law, but they're also able to put it into context. And this kind of lawyer is kind of the perfect example of the fact that you don't necessarily need to start off your career doing law. You can also be at sea for a little while and then law becoming kind of your second career. One of the lawyers who works with me at the moment, he was in the Marines for, I think, 12 years before then deciding to become a lawyer. So I think what kind of a lawyer you are can really influence how close you are to ships and to shipping companies. So it is useful to think about it in terms of if you really want to be still involved with that side of the industry, then probably there are some types of lawyers that are more able to do that, while instead other lawyers are more involved with the pure legal side. So for example, barristers, which are the lawyers that go to court and kind of think about the legal issues, and they go in front of a judge. So in movies, they're the ones who always carry books and wear a gown and maybe a wig. So everyone kind of, even if they are related to shipping law, they might not necessarily day-to-day be involved with ships or shipping companies. While instead, kind of in-house lawyers, which are the lawyers who are employed by shipping companies, they have a lot to do with the ships. So because they're employed by them, that's the only people that they represent and that's their entire work. Well, instead, kind of in the middle are disputes and transaction lawyers. So I am a disputes lawyer, and we are involved with ships and shipping companies in the sense that those are our clients, and we think about their cases and what affects them, but we don't necessarily have to deal with them on a day-to-day basis. It's more maybe once in a month or in very condensed periods. So if you kind of want a career which keeps you close to ships and shipping companies on a day-to-day basis, maybe barrister is probably not the best option, but equally if you're more involved with the law, then being a barrister is amazing. So I'm going to go to the next slide. All right, thanks. Yeah, so I think I also just wanted to say a few things about why I practice maritime law and why I think it's so exciting. So one thing that I really like is that you really get the chance of deep diving into a specific sector and becoming an expert at something that not all lawyers or even not all people in the industry are necessarily that familiar with or know that much about as you do. And that is because maritime law kind of combines legal knowledge with industry specialism. And another thing that I really like about maritime law is that it has a really long-standing legal heritage. So it's really fascinating because some of the oldest and most important legal cases arose in the context of shipping and sea voyages. And some of the principles that developed even as far back as the 18th century are still relevant today. So there is a really long-standing history there. And then something else as well is that maritime law is very international and cross-jurisdictional. So because by their very nature, ships have to travel from one place to another and oftentimes from one country to another and in international waters, this means that it might not necessarily be English law that is the relevant law. So practicing maritime law essentially involves many different national and even at times sort of international legal systems. And what I especially like is kind of being able to work with lawyers from other countries. So we do a lot of work with kind of Italian lawyers and Greek lawyers. And it's interesting because I get to sort of explain what the position in English law is, but at the same time, I get to hear from them what their view of how their local law applies in a specific circumstance. And I think that's like quite special to maritime law. And then something else that I really enjoy is kind of thinking about and talking about what maritime law is going to look like in the future. So, for example, the need to reach carbon neutrality is a huge topic at the moment, and some laws are being put into place that for specific requirements for ships. So, for example, there are some laws that kind of prohibit ships from entering certain ports if these ships do not use at least the minimum requirement of renewable or green energy fuels. So it's really interesting to think about the future and kind of try and predict it and kind of tell shipping companies and what their ships will have to look like in the future, and sort of just think about that. So yeah. I think next I'm sort of prepared a slide. I don't know why I can't really. All right, thanks. Okay. So with this slide here, I've tried to sort of kind of lay out what like lawyers do on a day-to-day basis, because I think it can be difficult to picture in your mind what that can be like. Basically, you kind of have to think about a ship going from city A to city B. And what lawyers really do is related with questions like who owns that ship, who organized the voyage, is the ship carrying goods? And if it is carrying goods, who do those goods belong to? And what nationality is this ship? Is the ship going to enter a foreign country? What port is the ship going to stop at? And so on. So at a very basic level, there's three main players in any kind of shipping voyage. And these are the charterers. So the charterers are kind of like the people that hire the ship. So you have to think about it in terms of almost hiring a car. So the charterers are the people that want to use the car, and they hire the ship for a period of time and for a specific trip. And they're responsible for the fuel and are allowed to use the vessel as they want. But this has to be subject to the terms and conditions that they have agreed with the ship owner. The ship owner instead is the person that owns the ship. So they kind of agree to bring the ship to a specific port at a specific time on a specific date, and they're usually responsible for the maintenance and for hiring a crew. And the cargo owners are the people that own the goods that will be transported on the ship, which is I think in the sector is called cargo, which a term that you may be familiar with. And I think the thing that is really key here is that every person has a written agreement with each other, and that is called a contract. So lawyers really come in at two stages. And the first is to kind of help, for example, the ship owner and the charterer write down what the terms of their agreements are. So for example, how long will the charterer be able to use the ship? For how much money will it have to pay the ship owner to use the ship, and so on. And the reality, of course, is that there's a lot more players in this scenario, and lawyers are involved with the relationships between each player. And then the second point at which lawyers come in is when things go wrong. So let's imagine that, for example, the ship is traveling and a terrible storm happens and it wrecks part of the ship. So this kind of raises a lot of questions like, will the charterers have to pay for the cost of repairing the wreck? Or is it the ship owners who have to pay because at the end of the day, it's their ship? And other things like, if the charterers are the ones who have to pay, how much do they have to pay? And are the charterers responsible for the fact that the ship was damaged? So if there was a weather forecast that there was going to be a storm and the charterers still decided that the ship should sail, they would be probably a bit more responsible. So sometimes, for example, the ship owner and the charterer would not agree on who is to blame and who has to kind of take responsibility for things that happen. And that is when lawyers come in and try to help sort out the situation and advise them on what to do. I think, yeah, next slide. Yeah, so another example of things that we do have to do with helping companies deal with bad situations that happen or accidents that happen while at sea. And a perfect example to this is what happened during the Mobil Nigeria oil spill, which is a transaction that my firm advised on. Well, more than a transaction, is a terrible accident. So what happened at the time was that one of the pipelines on one of Mobil, by the way, is an oil company, Mobil platform kind of burst, and then 40,000 barrels of oil were kind of dispersed into the Niger River Delta. So I think this is a perfect example of kind of one of those problem scenarios that can happen during maritime operations. And basically what happened then was that the oil arrived to cover 850 kilometers of the Nigerian coastline, and it kind of really harmed fishing communities and created a lot of damage. So lawyers in that kind of situation advise companies like Mobil on how to react to the incident. So for example, in that occasion, Mobil responded with range of equipment to clean the spill, with skimmers and coastal protection equipment. But on the other hand, we also help companies by representing them to meet any claims that might arise. So in that instance, this spill kind of prompted a widespread backlash from local residents and groups. And in total, there were approximately 14,000 claims, and they made a total of $100 million US. So basically all these small fishing communities wanted Mobil to pay them money for the damage that was caused. And in the end, the Federal High Court in Lagos, Nigeria, said that Mobil had to pay $32 million US in damages to the people that were affected by the oil spill. So what lawyers do is kind of help the company meet these claims and help them navigate through these sort of accidents. In next slide. So another sort of thing that lawyers are involved in, as I was mentioning before, is kind of thinking about where is the maritime industry going in the future and helping clients see that and react to that. So decarbonization, for you, those of you who may not know, is basically the process of moving away from using carbon to fuel ships. So we think this is going to be one of the biggest shifts in the shipping industry over the next 30 years. And it is going to be really challenging because new laws will come into place, new requirements, new technologies, new sources of energy. And at the moment, it's still really challenging because there isn't that much technology available, and clean energy sources are not as efficient and they're not that broadly available. But as maritime lawyers, we need to be on top of all these changes in order to make sure that our clients comply with the laws that are introduced, and also, where possible, they are key players in achieving a transition towards clean energy sources. So yeah, next. Yeah, I think it would be I thought it'd be quite useful to be a bit more practical and sort of explain what it is that I really do on a day-to-day basis, because I think so far I've kind of given an overview of the broader picture, but this is very like the practical reality of what I do. So a lot of what I do is has to do with legal research, which is essentially researching questions of law, because lawyers don't know everything off the top of their head. They have to kind of study and read a law and look at old cases and try to find kind of the solution to their problem through legal research. So that is a lot of what I do. And this helps us and our clients to kind of form claims and defenses and understand in what situations do we have to comply with what law. Another thing that I'm sort of quite heavily involved in is drafting. So that means creating a first initial version of an official document. So this could be like a legal advice or letters to the court or articles for legal journals and all sorts of other things, really. Then business development is also quite a big part of being the lawyer, and that means kind of helping us as a law firm, but also myself personally as a lawyer, to kind of reach out to clients and win work. So it's basically trying to becoming known as a lawyer and wanting people to be represented by the law firm, by me, and kind of wanting to seek out our help when needed. And then a final thing is kind of like, as I mentioned, always being on top of industry and legal updates. So keeping up to date with news, especially those that affect the maritime industry, with new laws being introduced and new court decisions as well. So if you're thinking that being a maritime lawyer is something that might interest you, it is really important to think about the skills that are necessary to kind of get there. So if you're interested in this career, you should probably ask yourself if you have the potential to achieve these skills and to perfect them over time. This is not to say that you're expected to have these skills from the very beginning, or even when you start working. I'm still working on kind of developing a lot of these skills, but it's still good to ask yourself whether you would be able to develop them over time and have that kind of commitment. I think the first one that is quite important is having an inquisitive mind, and that kind of means being curious, wanting to dig deeper into things, not taking things at their face value, asking questions and kind of seeking the answer, both independently and with other people's help, but when necessary. So having an inquisitive mind to me doesn't necessarily mean seeking to find the correct solution, but more trying to understand what are the different lines of argument, because oftentimes in law, and especially with maritime law, there is just no correct solution. It's all about just thinking about what the answer could be or what the different answers could be. Another thing that is really essential and that I personally find really difficult is attention to detail. And that kind of means proofreading, sense checking, catching nuances and differences. and basically making sure that what you're writing and what you're saying is correct, and yeah, always double checking everything. Then organization and planning is really important as well. So often the work can be really busy, so it's important to be able to prioritize, set deadlines and meet them, and know what is urgent and what is not in a certain situation. And then breaking down complex issues. Often when you become a lawyer, you will have to explain very difficult concepts that you are an expert in, and you know exactly what you're talking about, and it might be very obvious to you, but the person that you're talking to has absolutely no idea what it is that you're talking about. So it's really important to be able to just simplify it to them and make it accessible. Yeah, I think next slide. So if you are thinking about sort of pursuing career in maritime law, or even just in law, there are different things that you can do and think about even from GCSE level. I think in terms of starting to think about the skills that I mentioned beforehand, I think academic rigor is a really good way to start working on them, because the law will always require, even at my level and even at more senior level, even when you're 50 maybe, it requires you to be quite rigorous with studying and always being on top of new cases and reading and sort of all those things that you can practice a lot when you're in school. And then also you can start thinking about the next steps, maybe like, what do you want to do at A levels? What university do you want to do? Maybe what would you like to study undergraduate, and what the different options are more generally. And then at A levels, I think one of the most amazing things about the law career is that it's very welcoming to all people from different types of backgrounds. So I wouldn't say that there is necessarily a prescribed number of subjects that you have to take at A level that will make you a good lawyer. You can take anything from like arts to sciences, but I think it is important to choose subjects that will kind of develop certain types of skills. So for example, application to logic is really important, and you can get that from physics, or you can get that from history. I will say that obviously reading and writing skills are quite important to become a maritime lawyer. So maybe taking one kind of essay-based subjects will help with that. And then sort of university level, if you do want to go to university, I think you can choose to either do law undergraduate, so yeah, going to university, studying law, or you can do something else at university. You can maybe do history, physics, or anything that you're interested in. And then after you graduate to university, do a graduate diploma in law. And then after that, you have to sit through 1 year of a course. Well, it can be 7 months to 1 year long, and then you have to take a series of exams, and that's called the solicitor's qualifying examination, or the legal practice course. I think the SQE is now replacing the legal practice course. I will say this is very specific to if you want to become a solicitor, but there are, I think, equivalent examinations and qualifying sort of tests that you have to take if you want to become a barrister, or yeah, I mean, those are the two main things. But if you want to become a solicitor, that's the path to go down. Yeah. And then I think in terms of opportunities, it's useful to think about where it is that you can actually work as a maritime lawyer. So as I said, I work for a big international law firm, and what that means is really like a company that only employs lawyers, and it has offices all over the world, and we share certain clients. But I think the key aspect is that although I do maritime law, not all lawyers do that. There's lawyers specialized in energy, cybersecurity, and all sorts of fields. But we all work in the same office, in the same kind of under the same name. I think the alternatives to that are working for a very specialized shipping law firm, which are basically law firms that only do shipping work, and they are very just only doing that, and they tend to be more local. So only have offices in the UK or only in like a specific country. The other option is private practice, which I mentioned briefly at the beginning, and that means being employed by a shipping company and just working for them or being their special lawyer, and that's your only client basically, and that brings you very close to shipping companies and I think just the shipping world more closely into both day to day. And then you can also work for the government as a civil servant, and for shipping organizations such as the International Maritime Organization, the IMO, and those are also very good options. And then in terms of, I think, opportunities that will be able to get you there, I think what I spoke about earlier are kind of more like the requirements that everyone needs to go down to. And I think here I'm talking more about how do you put yourself out there to become a good candidate for that job that you might want. So I think having industry experience, so for example, being a cadet for MSSC, is a really good starting point because it means that you know a lot about the sector and that gives you kind of a head start compared to other people. But I think also it's quite important to have real life experience to what being a lawyer is like. So you can do that with doing internship and applying to different law firms and seeing what type of work they do, who their clients are, what type of shipping companies they work for. We also have an apprenticeship program, and that is something that other law firms in London also offer. And basically this doesn't require you to go to university, so you can go from school straight into working in a law firm. And the program lasts 6 years, and at the end of it, you will become a qualified lawyer. So it's quite a new thing, but I think it's really good if you think that maybe university is not for you, you wouldn't be as happy to go to university, but you still have very impressive skills, and you would be probably really good at starting off work right away after school. It's very competitive, but it is a really, really good opportunity if you don't think university is an experience that you're considering. So yeah, definitely would suggest applying to that. And yeah, and then just I think more specifically spring days for people, I think in the first year of university, they're kind of like introductory 1 week programs to just go around law firms and see what kind of work they do and meet a few people. And then vacation schemes, which are kind of longer programs over the summer, usually starting from the second year of university onwards. And they, at the end of it, usually you get a job interview and you will be hired if you're good to then work at the law firm. And yeah, that's sort of what I did in my second year of university. I did a vacation scheme, and then I was hired to work and then started work after university. But yeah, so you can see that there are very many different kind of types of lawyer that you can be, different people that hire maritime lawyers, and then also different ways to sort of get there. And as I said at the beginning, you don't necessarily need to start becoming a lawyer from the outset. You can be at sea at the beginning, and then if you decide to later in your career kind of have a shift and go back and study law and yeah, become a lawyer later on. So yeah, I think that was kind of all I had to say. So if there are any questions.
Yeah, so if there's any questions from the cadets, if you want to put it down in the Q&A below. That was great. Thanks, Alice. I think for the cadets, if we just emphasize on, you don't have to do it right now. You can always go back, like I said, get some industry experience. You can always come into law whenever you feel like it. I think that's one of the most key things. I'm 24 and I'm considering doing it still, and I've been at sea, so I understand completely.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's also what you will find being a lawyer. You will find people that have all sorts of backgrounds, and that's really what is so good about it, because they have different experiences and bring different kind of points of view to the table. So yeah, it's definitely a very good environment to be in.
Yeah, definitely. If it's not something that's high up on your priority, but you're thinking about it, definitely keep it there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No questions. Quiet bunch.
I think also I'm very happy to just like if anyone comes up with any questions later on, can reach me by email and I will do my best to answer them.